Book after book after book that has come out during the reign of this crazy son of a bitch, Donald Trump, and subsequent to his being kicked to the curb, have indicated how the authors of these books, who held prominent positions in the so-called Trump administration, at various times were ready to quit, ready to say, this is insane. I got to get away from this crazy bastard. And yet none of them, with one or two slight exceptions, none of them ever took the step of notifying the American public that the man who was sitting as president of the United States was a fucking psychopath and was slowly destroying the country. That's the part that bothers me about all these books. The latest is from Trump's former defense secretary for a very short period of time, Mark Esper, right? Mark Esper has a new book out entitled A Sacred Oath. And I haven't read the book. I've read some excerpts from it. But if it were a sacred oath, then why didn't Esper step up and say, this man is a crazy lunatic son of a bitch and I'm out of here. American public, beware. But I digress. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley, according to the book, told Defense Secretary Mark Esper that he was, and he held up his thumb and forefinger together and said, I'm this close to resigning on the spot after a contentious Oval Office meeting. Oval Office. Yeah, it was Oval Awful, wasn't it? Oval Office meeting with the Orange Vomit in the summer of 2020. And according to CNN, the exchange between Mark Milley and Trump occurred after protests over the police killing of George Floyd broke out in front of the White House. Remember that in Lafayette Park? When that infamous walk through the park with General Mark Milley, I just about lost my shit when I saw that. But anyway, the conversation that Mark Milley had with Esper, where he said, I'm this close to resigning, was one of several stunning discussions, according to CNN, recounted in this book. Now, it was published Tuesday. And the book, like so many before it, portrays the Trump White House as just a shithole, a cesspool, focused entirely on Trump's reelection and nothing to do with the governance of this country. And yet there are millions of people who are going to vote for this pig bastard again? Oh, my God. So anyway, when there were the demonstrations, the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, the demonstrations that were protesting the execution of George Floyd, when those demonstrations occurred, according to the book, Trump was angry with what was going on in the United States. And he called General Milley and he asked for, this is a quote, 10,000 troops to be deployed in the streets of Washington, D.C. This is what is in store for us, folks. Huh? Anyway, that part is according to Mark Esper. And after receiving that phone call, General Milley told Esper about the conversation. And Esper said that General Milley's face was, quote, ashen as he relayed the conversation with Trump. Now, I'll be the first to admit that General Mark Milley does not look like, when I've seen him on television, like the healthiest man alive. He looks like a man extremely haggard, extremely worried. He's very pale. He's obviously overweight. He's got these dark circles under his eyes that indicate something. What, not getting enough sleep? But Mark Milley has never, in all the pictures I've seen of him, he's never impressed me as somebody in the peak of health. You know what I'm saying? But that's, of course, none of my business. Anyway, the day after Mark Milley said that to Espy, Trump reportedly called Esper himself and Mark Milley to the White House for a meeting about the protests. Now, Esper doesn't describe in his book what was said in the meeting, I guess out of respect for the bullshit concept of executive privilege, even when somebody's trying to overthrow the government. But Esper said that the conversation was, quote, loud, contentious, and unreal. Everything about this miserable son of a bitch, Donald Trump, is unreal. And it was after that General Milley told Mark Esper he was this close to resigning on the spot. Now, as a result of all this being published, the office of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs issued no comment. Well, what the hell are they going to say, right? And it was during this period, according to Esper, that Donald Trump, this incipient, murderous, psycho-fucking-pathic monster, Trump raised the idea of shooting people who took to the streets after George Floyd's death, shooting them. Speaking with CNN's Anderson Cooper on AC360 the other night, former Defense Secretary Mark Esper said he had been, quote, dumbstruck and, quote, shocked to hear Trump talk about shooting peaceful protesters. So according to the book that Esper wrote, he and General Milley were able to convince this psychopathic prick to avoid a terrible outcome, the one that Trump wanted. But, Esper writes, we were shaken, end quote. So that was 2 years ago. Mr. Esper. And I only have one ignorant question from little old podcaster here in the foothills of the North Georgia mountains. Why in the fuck didn't you do something then? Why didn't you make this known? Mr. Secretary, why didn't you call CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, all of them, and hold a conference and say the President of the United States wanted me to provide 10,000 troops in the streets to kill protesters? So fuck you, Mark Esper. I'm not doubting what you're saying, but you cowardly son of a bitch, you wouldn't do it? You waited until you could write your fucking book? Well, have fun spending the money, Esper. Esper also told Anderson Cooper that he also had been on the brink of resigning, but he said that his West Point training that teaches, duty, honor, country, kept him from doing so. We didn't have to resign, Esper, you cowardly prick. Don't hide behind West Point code. You didn't do it because, I don't know what your reason was, but you were duty-bound to do it. But he told Cooper, quote, I thought the best thing for me to do for the country was to serve. The best thing for me would have been, to quit. And he told Cooper that he was also concerned about who had replaced him in the role of Secretary of Defense. And he said to Cooper, quote, I don't think the president was well served by some people he brought around him. And unfortunately, he kept attracting people like that. End quote. Well, shit attracts shit, right, Mr. Secretary? No, this is bullshit to me. This is utter bullshit. This is cowardly bullshit from Mark Esper. He didn't have to resign. He didn't have to resign. Neither did Mark Milley. But after hearing what they heard, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, after hearing what this miserable Nazi fuck had said to them, and they maintained their silence. They maintained their silence. Now, how does one react to General Milley and Secretary Esper? For me, the way I react is to call them cowardly son of a bitches who were involved in keeping this filthy bastard as president. If these two would have said what he said, what Trump said, there would have been a reaction that maybe would have motivated Mike Pence to rid the country of this filthy fucker. But they didn't say anything. They didn't say anything. And in the book, Mark Esper says that he felt the orange vomit became more emboldened and willing to raise the middle finger to the Constitution and the American people after he was acquitted by the Senate in his first impeachment trial. And that's when he brought in, Trump did, all these slimy fucking gangster loyalists that cluster around Trump like flies around a shit pile, like former acting director of national intelligence Richard Grenell, and former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. And Esper said people like this took these outrageous ideas, quote, to a new level, end quote. Yeah, it's called, Mr. Esper, fascism. And you, a graduate of West Point, duty-bound not to continue your allegiance to a fucking psychopath. You didn't take an oath to Trump, Mr. Esper. Neither did you, Mark Milley. You took an oath to the Constitution. So piss on both of you, for never having said a word in the moment. And now you step out with your little quotes and your little books and all this other shit. God damn both of you, and the rest of these slime who worked for Trump and knew what was going on and said nothing in the moment until their goddamn books could come out. Do you think, and I wonder if these people think that the assholes who still support Trump and the people he is salting into secretaries of state offices and presidential runs and congressional runs and all this other shit, I wonder if the average American who still sucks up to Trump would have, they're not going to read the book. These fuckers don't read. But maybe they would have listened if it would have occurred on CNN or MSNBC. Even the Fox sewer would have had to pick that one up. If these two, the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, would have stood up and said, hey, listen, we got a serious problem. This son of a bitch is crazy. But you didn't do it, neither one of you. So fuck both of you. I'm serious. It's just unreal how unpatriotic you are, how both of you ignored your oath to defend and protect the Constitution. In that same interview with Anderson Cooper Monday night, Esper said, quote, the Republican Party must move beyond Trump and look for the next generation of leaders, end quote. Who, like you? Like you, Esper? Like Milley? Like who? Who in the Republican Party? Who? There is nobody. You don't have a Republican Party in this country anymore, Esper. You have a fascist Christian organization hell-bent on destroying everything and replacing it with a form of sick, fucked up theocracy. And Esper doesn't know that. Mark Milley doesn't know that. I mean, both those guys have graduate degrees in goddamn near everything. They're very intelligent men. And I can sit here in the Daniel Scapin studio out here in the fucking mountains in North Georgia, well, close to the mountains, and understand what's going on, and they can't? Bullshit. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.